in terms of services and shared mobility, this is more towards the B2B side of the things, where EV rentals, subscription services, carpooling, ride sharing platforms, basically providing vehicles for these specific businesses, so that the operational costs are within limits. Micro mobility sharing, EV maintenance and repair services. So earlier we used to have certain players where even for our last mile logistics, we used to kind of these like bounds and all, which are now shifting their all their fleet to electric vehicles, so because so that they can reduce their operational costs drastically. So this is another area where there is much more business opportunity available. And the last, basically, let us now look at what does the current adoption trends look like in the Indian market scenario, and how the futures are being kind of projected like. So in terms of overall market size, if we see as per an intelligence report, so EVs are projected to contribute 60% of the overall automobiles sold in by the year 2030. And this is going to be a $400 billion market across the globe. And also for Indian statistic, as per Niti Aayog, so basically, the government is actually projecting the penetration levels of two-wheelers to touch 80%, three-wheelers 60%, four-wheelers 50%, bus and truck around 30% in the next 5 to 6 years. And the key stakeholders that are impacted because of this specific change from the ICE to the EVs are, one, of course, the OEMs, the vehicle manufacturers, battery manufacturers, and then the fleet operators, typically, which include battery as a service providers, mobility as a service providers, and even individual companies having their own fleet to manage their entire operations. So there are also some latest developments in this space. Like if you all can recollect, there were certain incidents that happened in the market almost 1.5 years back, where electric vehicles caught fire. So there were certain stringent norms also which government has brought in relation to that, where the battery has to undergo very stringent testing standards for it to actually get deployed in the vehicle and rolled out onto the road. So we have this AAS 156 battery compliance norms in place right now, and then we have a lot of net zero emission goals by individual countries. Individual businesses also do have net zero emission individual goals for the entire business entity itself, like global businesses including Amazon, IKEA, FedEx, even Indian businesses like Gati, Zomato, Flipkart, who are majorly dependent on these fleet, are trying to transition to net zero emissions. So other latest development is, like, we also see a lot of new entrants coming in this specific space, and also the existing traditional big OEMs also are working on releasing new EV models. So now let us look at what is the current penetration level in the Indian EV market. So if we see, yeah, we talk a lot about EVs and all, but if we see in terms of penetration levels, where exactly are we? So if you look at the two-wheeler market, so two-wheeler market around 22-23, we are somewhere close to around 3 to 4% penetration levels. There is still a long way to actually go in terms of two-wheelers that we are supposed to go, and also in terms of passenger cars, we are less than 1%. So there is still a huge long way to actually go ahead. And also the other important thing is, we can see much more penetration levels happening in the three-wheeler space, and that is because it is majorly a B2B market which the three-wheelers actually serve. So where the important use case that actually kicks in is the reduction of the overall operating costs. So three-wheeler is pretty much faster along with the bus, where they could kind of get this EVs deployed and can reduce their overall operational cost. So that's the reason why we see more penetration of electric vehicles in this specific segment. And going ahead by the year 2030, this is I mean, kind of a projection level as per one of the report released by Bloom Primer report. So we could see that basically three-wheelers can have the potential to touch 85% penetration levels by the year 2030, and two-wheelers can somewhere reach around close to 65-70% of penetration levels. So and the passenger cars, of course, we see that that could be somewhere close to around 25%, and on the commercial side it could be somewhere around 60%. So this is what the projection levels look like, considering the future adoption of EVs in the Indian market. So there are a lot of factors that need to be considered over here. I mean, these are not like, what do you say, 25 means it will reach 25, because there are quite a few factors that need to be taken care before we actually are there at that specific point, which we'll be discussing, touching upon slightly in our subsequent slides. So the other important factor which I kind of touched upon earlier is the battery price in the entire vehicle. So if you look at the battery price, it almost constitutes 50% of the overall vehicle costing. So if we see the overall global battery prices, so we see a spike that has happened recently because of a lot of sudden requirement happening, and there was a production constraint at the mining. So there was a sudden spike, but over a period of time, we can see the overall raw material costing for the batteries, it can actually drastically go down to almost 50% of what it is, levels at which it is right now. So what does this mean? This definitely means that going ahead, once the volumes increases, the overall cost, initial cost of the vehicle, there is a very much a chance that this can drastically go down by almost 40 to 50% than what it is right now available in the market. So this is the major outlook from this specific slide that we have put in, that globally, the because of increase in volumes, because of increase in the numbers, EV adoption, so the and there's this economies of scale that would actually come in, which would drive down the price of this entire raw material, which then will actually impact the end pricing of the vehicle, making it affordable for the end users. So yeah, so now till now we have looked at what is an EV, basically what are the factors that are driving the EV adoption in India, what are the current adoption trends that we see in the Indian market, and how the future looks like. But what are the key challenges that we are facing in terms of this driving this EV adoption? So let us have a look on these specific aspects as well. So if you look at the key challenges, maybe 1.5 2 years back, I mean, the market was flooded with a lot of models. I mean, the basic business model that worked upon at the time was, people used to get the parts from the different countries. They used to kind of assemble it and kind of sell it in the market, which is very much less priority on the safety of the vehicle. So considering the I mean, the EV architecture, I mean, good amount of R&D needs to actually go into the vehicle for developing it for the Indian conditions. So this wasn't there at least 3 4 years back, but right now we do have a company spending a lot of amount on the R&D and improving the product quality, overall user experience of the vehicle. So this is one of the challenge where we see an innovation happening on a day-to-day basis. This next one is basically the component manufacturers. So if we see, there was a huge dependency a couple of years back, there was a huge dependency on China and other global markets for us to kind of get these components and then kind of assemble in the vehicle. So this is one of the key important factors, because due to any global disturbances, I mean, the entire supply chain gets disrupted. So this is one of the other major impact that we could see, which would result, one, in the production and other service of the existing vehicles that are flying on the road. So this is another important challenge that we have in terms of developing all the components required for the vehicle assembly in-house, basically localization of the components. And then the next one, most important thing, is basically the charging infrastructure. So when, as a customer, if I want to purchase a vehicle, I definitely need to know how much range would I get per charge. And if I don't have a certainty on that, then definitely that's going to be a challenge. And also, if I have that specific statistic in place, I would be able to plan my commute. Basically, like, if my vehicle is going to give me a range of just maybe 50 kilometers per charge, and if I have to travel maybe 80 kilometers per day, then I'll have to get the vehicle charged somewhere in between. But the charging infrastructure wasn't that much extended. 1 2 years back across India. But right now, yes, there are quite a few startups, companies that are working on addressing this specific challenge. So basically, without charging infrastructure, I mean, there'll be range anxiety within the customers. Once there is range anxiety, I will definitely not prefer an EV. I will go for an ICE vehicle, which again will in turn, it's a chicken and egg problem, because no customers are there. Why should I invest in charging infrastructure? So this is what was actually happening in the market. But right now, government is also kind of pushing setting up the charging points so that it is easily accessible for most of the public during their commute. And then the other important challenge was that lack of financing options. So the main hindrance for this specific thing is that, like, for example, I take a loan, and tomorrow if I don't pay, normally what happens in the IC space is that the financier actually comes, he kind of takes the vehicle and then he resells it, and then kind of compensates for whatever the balance that I had to actually pay. But in the EVs, ideally the secondary market wasn't established that much. So I mean, people were kind of purchasing only the first hand vehicles. There wasn't much bigger market that was established, so even the financials weren't aware how to kind of underwrite in the risk which they are actually kind of carrying on financing these electric vehicles. But now, as we see going ahead with the incoming of good quality vehicles, much more range, much more reliability, so we see that this specific issue is also getting addressed as the time is progressing. So, I mean, one thing which I also wanted to kind of convey is that this question I also always had in my mind: are EVs the only available option for us? Aren't there any alternatives for EVs available in the market? If we see, yeah, like there are certain alternatives basically for safe, sustainable mobility options. We could see there are other options such as hydrogen fuel cells. I mean, there's a lot of investment that's happening on this specific space as well, wherein companies like Toyota are heavily invested into this, where they have developed a prototype bus prototype. I mean, working running on hydrogen fuel cell. And there are also other alternative options where we have biofuels, hybrid vehicles, alternative propulsion engines using CNG, LNG, solar powered vehicles. But if we see in terms of commercial viability, so EVs are the only ones which we could see at this point in time where they are kind of commercially available or commercially viable in terms of the overall volumes that we see. So definitely there are other options available in the market, but there's a lot of research going on into this specific space as well. But yeah, we'll have to see how it kind of unfolds. Even in EVs, there are a lot of, even the chemistries, alternate chemistries are also kind of being tested. Like someone pointed out, sodium ion chemistry. So that's also something which I mean, few of the companies are actually working upon. So even within electric vehicles, there are different chemistries which are being kind of adopted by the OEMs, trying to see which one works better, which one is more commercially viable once we have huge volume. So yes, I mean, the future only unfolds as we proceed, because there's a lot of research and development that's happening in the specific space. So I think the other most important thing is for people who are actually looking for maybe a career or for maybe setting up a business in the EV ecosystem. What are the major, use cases that are available out there? So one is on the vehicle manufacturing and the supply chain. So last 3 to 4 years, there has been a lot of push from the government on this side by providing a lot of production linked incentives and all, which actually has driven this specific space quite a bit. So one is the in itself design and production, setting up of the entire production plant, and then the charging in setting up charging infra at different points in the city, making it accessible to all the users, commuters. And also a lot of emphasis was there on the different alternate technologies which I just touched upon, and ensuring it is commercially viable in terms of production. And also the other important point which was stressed upon was the localization kind of component and material sourcing, reducing the dependency from the other countries. So these on the vehicle manufacturing and supply chain side. So these are some of the areas which one can actually look into. And then the next one is the software and the technology side, where we are also currently working upon, which typically includes we manage fleet management platforms, where the entire end-to-end digital management of the EV fleet can be done utilizing software solutions. And then there's a lot of this vehicle to grid technology that's actually happening. It's already prevalent in the US, where it's a business in itself, where you charge your vehicle when the demand is in off peak time, and you actually kind of provide the energy back to the grid when the demand is huge, so that you make a cut in between. So that's a huge business already prevalent in the Western market, US market, and that's also something that going in the future we could see coming up. And then the connected car and analytic solutions, basically making the car well connected in terms of getting real time updates, anomalies, so that the product can be improved and the overall user experience can also be improved. And the next one is basically the charging energy management and autonomous solutions going ahead. And the other field that we are looking at, the services and shared mobility, this is more towards the B2B side of the things, where EV rentals, subscription services, carpooling, ride sharing platforms, basically providing vehicles for these specific businesses, so that the operational costs are within limits. Micro mobility sharing, EV maintenance and repair services. So earlier we used to have certain players, where even for our last mile logistics, we used to kind of these like bounds and all, which are now shifting their fleet to electric vehicles, so because so that they can reduce their operational costs drastically. So this is another area where there is much more business opportunity available. And the last, basically, the financing solution. So like I stated earlier, there was a quite a bit barrier in terms of financing the electric vehicles, but now we see that trend actually changing, where a lot of new players are coming in and also assisting in financing the electric vehicles, owing to the coming of good quality vehicles onto the road. So that is one important stream that's actually picking up. And then there's also carbon offset market solution, that also certain companies which have come up, where based on your carbon emission or reduction that you are doing as a company or as an individual, you can get certain carbon credits, which you can kind of sell to other entities or companies which are in need. So this is also another space that actually coming up. And then yes, of course, investment into EV related startups and EV data management. So these are broadly the areas, I mean, use cases in the EV ecosystem, where one can actually kind of focus in terms of looking for any opportunities or any business setup, things like that. So yeah, I mean, a lot has been said, but we'll just kind of summarize what we have discussed and how the way ahead looks like. So if we see, I mean, in terms of the current trends, there is a lot of positive momentum that we could see, mainly because of the drive from the government. A lot of funding and investments happening in this specific space. A lot of innovative solutions that are actually coming up, maybe in terms of alternative chemistries, improving the overall efficiencies of electric vehicles, reducing the overall costs, and also setting up charging infrastructure. The penetration levels also we see kind of increasing, I mean, over a period of time. So all these kind of set kind of a positive momentum in terms of the overall EV adoption in the Indian market. However, like we stated, definitely nothing comes easy. There are challenges, like we discussed, the supply chain disruptions, basically huge dependency on other markets. So we need to look at localization of the component procurement. Range anxiety is other important major challenge. Yes, there are innovations happening, but yes, we need to be continuously innovating for us to reach a specific position, where the user or the driver will be comfortable driving the electric vehicle without any range anxiety. Maybe even presence of the charging network, spread of charging network across the different geographies. So yeah, right now we could see a lot of charging available within the city, but yeah, now if you're looking at commute from city to city, so that is where even the focus is now being shifted. We see some charging stations coming up, but yeah, there's a long way to go. But work is being done on that specific site. And looking at the way ahead, so there needs to be a focus on developing an expertise in niche segments. So basically, like someone's working on the connected vehicle technology, they need to be very much they need to dwell deeper into that specific core area and innovate the product. So that is what it means, where we need to have pockets of innovation that should happen across the entire value chain.